And please join me now in welcoming John Green.
So my camcorder is broken. First off, I need to acknowledge something, which is that there are a lot of people here who thought that they were coming to like just a regular book signing. And so for those people, particularly the adults who have just started reading my books, I can't explain to you everything that's involved in this, but I can explain to you that I have a video blog with my brother. And all those videos start out, "Good morning, Hank, it's Tuesday." Or whatever day it is, but it's usually Tuesday. So I'm going to ask you to say good morning. Type a few pages ago. This book is a work of fiction. I made it up. Neither novels nor their readers, I see this as a first printing because it says neither novels or their readers, but that's been fixed. Neither novels nor their readers benefit from attempts to divine whether any facts hide inside a story. Such efforts attack the very idea that made-up stories can matter, which is sort of the foundational assumption of our species. I appreciate your cooperation in this matter. And this is the beginning of chapter 1. Late in the winter of my 17th year, my mother decided I was depressed, presumably because I rarely left the house, spent quite a lot of time in bed, read the same book over and over, ate infrequently, and devoted quite a bit of my abundant free time to thinking about death. Whenever you read a cancer booklet or website or whatever, they always list depression among the side effects of cancer. But in fact, depression is not a side effect of cancer. Depression is a side effect of dying. Cancer is also a side effect of dying. Almost everything is, really. But my mom believed I required treatment, so she took me to see my regular Dr. Jim, who agreed that I was veritably swimming in a paralyzing and totally clinical depression, and that therefore my meds should be adjusted, and also I should attend a weekly support group. So that's what I'm going to read. I'm going to return this to Julia. So I get a lot of questions about that very beginning of the novel. I wanted to answer that question while also maybe saying something else about the book and why I wrote it. The question that I get most often is that cancer is not a side effect of dying. Dying is a side effect of cancer. Which is true in like a very narrow sense. But in the broader sense, cancer is a side effect of dying because cancer is a disease that is born of mutation. The reason cancer happens is because cells inside of our bodies mutate, and then whatever is supposed to turn off their replication ceases to turn it off, and there's out of control growth of this tumor. That is a side effect of dying, because the whole reason that mutation happens is because cells are always in the business of dying. Every cell in our body is constantly, well, with very few exceptions, and even those are dying in the broadest sense. All cells are dying. More generally, all organic matter at all times is dying, is in this process of sort of falling apart in the broadest sense. But it's also often in the process of coming together. So I have a 2.5-year-old son, and I've watched his body go from this thing I could hold in my, in my forearm to being this like squiggly thing capable of talking and asking me questions and making unreasonable requests of my time and all sorts of stuff. That process of coming from nothing into something and then slowly falling apart is the process of life. And I wanted to write about that as well as I could and as honestly as I could, and in a way that reflected the experience of the people I'd known and loved who lived with chronic illness and in many cases had died of it. And in my experience was that all of these things are a side effect of dying, and that our sort of cultural inability to acknowledge the reality and omnipresence of this falling apart represented a real sort of failure on our part to grapple with one of the most interesting parts of life. So I had that idea initially in like 2000. I was working as a student chaplain at a children's hospital, and I really wanted to write this story that was set in a children's hospital, and it starred this like super handsome hospital chaplain, kind of an alcoholic, and had a lot of troubles, but he was really cool, and all of his like bad qualities were made up for his like chiseled good looks and everything. And there were all these like hot lady doctors. Which hot lady doctor will he choose? Sort of the central question of this original manuscript. And I worked on that book in one form or another for 8 years. Just kept going back to it over and over again. I'd write it, sort of fail at writing it, and then I'd write a different book, and then I'd fail. I'd try and fail again, and then I'd write a different book, and this continued. But this was always the book I wanted to write, and in some ways The Fault in Our Stars is my first novel. This is the novel that I wanted to write first. I just didn't figure it out. I figured it out in 2009, or 2010, I guess. I had all this stuff. I'd written, 100,000, 200,000 words, which is maybe like 600 pages, but it was all crap. It was all about this, mostly about this chaplain. So I finally found a way into it through my friendship with a young woman who was a fan of our videos and a fan of my books, named Esther. Really more a fan of our videos, I have to say. I was reading Esther's diaries recently, and I always say like she was a fan of my books, but it's not really true. And Esther had cancer from the time that I knew her, and she died in August of 2010 when she was just 16. And knowing Esther and knowing her family and being friends with a lot of her friends, it pulled me out of the story. It took me out of the story, and it allowed me to center myself in this question of why are we falling apart, and why do we fall apart at different rates? So why is it that like my grandfather, who was a very nice guy, lived to be 93 years old and spent, saw all 7 continents and had this great full life, and Esther, who was also a very nice person, only lived to be 16, and for much of her life was circumscribed by this illness, by this chronic illness. And can we make sense of that world? Can we find a way to be hopeful in that world? Or are we best off just ignoring the reality? Because I think ultimately that's why we ignore this process of death that is constantly occurring inside of not just us, but in the planet itself. The planet itself is a kind of organism that is constantly, being born and falling apart and experiencing this same cycle. Do we ignore that because it is so, the reality of it, the reality of illness in children, the reality that not all lives are long lives is so unacceptable to us that we just can't even look at it? And was there a way for me to write a story that made it okay to look at? Because my experience with being friends, not just with Esther, but with the other young sick people I've known, is that it is not hard to look at them, and it is not hard to love them. It is not hard to love that reality. And that was, but you have to be brought into the place where it's okay and not scary to love and to look at the world as it is. The sentimental maudlin cancer stories that I have read when I was a young person and make fun of a lot in this book, don't do that for me. They don't take me into that place of love and respect. They take me in, they're really about the well people in the novels, not the sick ones. Because really what they're about is they're about that attempt to try to, that whole idea that people with cancer, particularly young people with cancer, exist so that the rest of us can learn important life lessons, right? So the rest of us can be grateful for every day. No, that is not why sick people exist. And that dehumanizes them and depersonalizes them and makes the story not about them but about the well, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to argue that a short life can also be a full life, and can also be a good life and a rich life, and that the definition of a rich, full life is not about whether it's long, although certainly it's easier and better if it is long, but it's about different kinds of good. And so I wanted to present in Hazel and Augustus different kinds of good lives, different ways of... Yes, Holden Caulfield thinks you're a phony.
You actually can use the microphone.
Oh, you want to walk up to the microphone, then everyone can hear you. Or...
If you could change anything about The Fault in Our Stars, would you, and what would it be?
That's an interesting question, because writers... So the reason I don't reread my books after they come out is because, of course, there are many insufficiencies in my work, and I am keenly aware of them, and I don't particularly enjoy being reminded of them. So there are two kinds of negative reviews, right? There are the negative reviews that you disagree with and that you think are stupid. For instance, when people say, I don't believe that teenagers are that smart. Well, that doesn't bother me, because I think I just disagree, It's always adults who say that too. It's funny, if you go through the Amazon reviews and you read which people said teenagers don't actually talk like that, it's a lot of people who then go on to be not that I read all of the reviews of my books. Not that there's 24,000 Goodreads reviews of The Fault in Our Stars and I've read every one of them. It's always people who are I'm in my 20s and I don't talk like that. And I'm well, that's not my fault. I shouldn't be held accountable for your failure to grapple with the interesting questions of the human species. And she was managing a really cool contemporary art gallery, and she's fascinating, really intelligent. We had brunch. I was really impressed with her. I heard that she was not dating anyone, and so I did my due diligence and everything. And then so I emailed 7 of my friends and I said, do you want to see the movie Lost in Translation tonight? And I CC'd Sarah. And then I emailed my other 6 friends and I said, not you. This turns out is a terrible strategy. never start a relationship on a lie. It will end. And indeed, she broke up with me after a few dates because I was so like performed like that, you know, because I was so like, I was trying so hard, and I was so far removed from like whatever authentic self I might have somewhere inside of me that she wasn't, you know, that interested. So, yes, so that did not work out. However, we then got back together and got married. Now we have a kid and everything's fine. So, she said that to me on our first date though, because before Lost in Translation, we went to this bagel deli, and she said I was talking about high school and how I imagined my life. We were talking about high school, and I said I was always imagining my life after high school and thinking about what adulthood would be like, and how like you can't indulge that impulse if you write the kind of novels that I write. And she said imagining the future is a kind of nostalgia, and I was like, I try not to indulge it at all in my novels. I try not to take my novels anywhere past the present. I try not to like send my characters to tell you what like. I don't want to prescribe that for you. I don't want to give you an order about where my characters end up or where the story ends up or anything like that, because I want that to be yours.
Instructions and tutorials are right there.
So
on
it's
the
very
website.
important to me. Hey there, Digital Bookmobile. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's very expensive, man, to be honest with you. It's not something that like will ever earn money on an advertising rep model, because it just costs. Educators are expensive, curriculum advisors are expensive, editors and animators are expensive, and it's a very big undertaking. I don't know that we'll have Google support again, in which case we will have to figure out what we want to do. We would love to keep doing it. I've never been so passionate about anything. I've never had as much fun making stuff, so hopefully we'll find a way to do it. This is truly the last question.
Hi, I'm a big fan of your books.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, so many of them are about teenagers and about this awkward stage of life where you're trying to figure out how to make friends and what to do with your life and what high school to go to and what career to pick. What advice would you have for young people?
What advice do I have for young people about going through all that stuff? I mean, the great poet Robert Frost once said, "The only way out is through." People will tell you that this is like supposed to be the best years of your life or whatever, but that's a dirty lie. It's an evil, pernicious lie. Adulthood is wonderful. There is a stability to adulthood that may seem like lame and boring to you when you're a teenager, but oh gosh, is it nice. To not have to wonder, like, who am I going to make out with next week? It's that same person it's been for many years. That's nice. To have the background, to know what it's like to have been in love, to know what it's like to experience loss, to be able to contextualize these feelings that are always welling up inside of us. I mean, adulthood doesn't stop being exciting by any stretch of the imagination, but you're able to contextualize the excitement a little bit better, which makes it much easier to survive. So my advice to you would be I guess I would say two things. First off, do listen to adults that you trust in your life. They know something. It's hard to do sometimes because you want, because sometimes they're wrong and sometimes they give you advice that's also not just the exact opposite of what you want to hear. And it's difficult to do things you don't want to do. It's difficult to do things that just sort of seem wrong, even if you know in the broadest sense that they're right. So I would encourage you to find adults that you trust and listen to them. The most important thing to me is to understand that like this will end in both like the best ways and the worst ways. Like things will go on, and you will go on, and you as I think Augustus says to Isaac in the middle of The Fault in Our Stars, you are going to have a big and wonderful life and do all kinds of wonderful things that you can't possibly imagine now. And so trust in that. Thank you.